Ambassador Paul Robinson was back in town recently. Mr. Robinson was a chief negotiator for the U.S. in nuclear talks with the Soviet Union in the late 80s and early 90s. And he's also a former president of Sandia National Labs. Ambassador Robinson recently gave a lecture for the Albuquerque International Association. Before his talk, he sat down with producer Sarah Gustavus to share his insights on international negotiations and the future of nuclear weapons management.
Ambassador Robinson, thanks for stopping by New Mexico PBS.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Sarah.
You have decades of experience working with international negotiations over nuclear weapons. Are you concerned about what you're seeing in the world today?
Oh, I think I, along with everyone else, have rights to be concerned. The world is in a little bit of a turmoil with a number of folks stretching their wings, the North Korea problem looming large. And instead of one superpower to confront, the U.S. faces two other superpowers in China and Russia. And I think there's a lot we need to work on and sort out.
You have negotiated some successful treaties that were ratified unanimously in the Senate. What lessons, when you look back, have you learned that you'd like to see applied today?
One of the things that's affected me is I happened to be in the right place at the right time, I think. One night during a late night meeting with heads of delegation, the topic of the future of Russia came up rather obtusely onto the table, but everyone on my side said, gee, you got to push this. What is going on? Until we got a statement that said they were actually looking at plans within the government to dissolve the Soviet Union, and I seem to be the first official to ever have been told that.
What year was that?
In 1989, and November the 4th of '89 to be specific, and we kept it secret for 27 years. What you say within negotiations are supposed to remain secret between just the sides until they are ratified and entry into force. So there's no problem with me talking about it now. And I thought that was probably one of the biggest things that ever happened, and how unbelievable it seemed to all of us on the other side of the table then. That they really admitted they were worried that the test sites where they had done their work were about to no longer be in their country.
That's a significant thing.
It was very significant at the time.
And when you look back now at where things are, there's, as you mentioned, some instability around the world. We here in New Mexico, folks have an investment in the management of the nuclear arsenal. Sandia manages nuclear weapons. Los Alamos has an important role in the history of nuclear weapons development. What do you think everyday New Mexicans should know and be thinking about right now as we watch these international events unfold?
Well, I think the whole question, the questions have a shadow over them of nuclear weapons, particularly both Russia and China have large arsenals and are renewing their work on arsenals today. So the U.S. is beginning a little late to try and redevelop. A lot of the things that are in the arsenal were weapons which I was responsible for the design team at Los Alamos many years ago, and they're still in the arsenal. But I think to understand now with more players, and certainly everyone sees North Korea and the strangeness of a nation spending so much money on defense, not only with nuclear weapons, but they have arsenals of every type of weapon imaginable ready to use. And no one, it is correct, no one seems to know a good solution at this point.
If you were to put yourself into the mind of those managers, those people in the roles you were in at Los Alamos and Sandia today, what do you think is on their minds, or what would you be thinking about if you were in that role?
Well, one of the things that I think Sandia learned well, and I learned it along with the Sandians, was to do strategic planning. If you don't worry about the future, it won't take care of itself. And you must plan ahead. And I was probably most proud of the place when before 9/11 happened, in fact, 3 years before, we'd made a big initiative looking at counterterrorism technologies and what we could do and have ready. We could see terrorism was beginning to affect nations all over the world, and we said, someday it's going to come within our borders, and what are we going to do about it? And so immediately we were ready with all sorts of things, like the Sandia foam, which was used to decontaminate all the congressional offices, post offices, post boxes, postal trucks against anthrax. And that's gone on to be an extremely useful thing, has been adapted for lots of other biological warfare threats, as well as chemical warfare threats. And those are the things I used to lose a lot of sleep about, that we were unprepared. So making sure the nation is prepared for whatever happens is one of the perhaps most important roles that the laboratories carry.
Do you think in this current context, can scientists still work together across borders, especially, say, scientists from here with Russian scientists?
The time of my negotiations were really unique because that's just what was happening. We had 6 policy people who had votes in the delegation, but out of our 60 people, I would say at least 50 or 50 plus were scientists involved in trying to find technical solutions to verification problems and what to do going forward. So we for the first time, and one of their leaders among the scientists wrote a book after it that said he was most impressed by the fact that scientists who had been designing nuclear weapons from both sides met and talked, and they could get along, and actually became as best friends as you can do at that time.
Also an important part of history. But do you think that people can come together today? Do you think that they can see some collaboration and some connections in the way that they did when you were doing this in the late 80s and 90s?
I am heartened by some of the things that happened when the Soviet Union broke up. And I think this has not been studied or publicized nearly enough. When they had this concept of the Commonwealth of Independent States, the first thing each of the nations asked for is that fundamental freedoms be enacted and listed, and they wanted a human rights treaty among all of the states in the CIS, most importantly with Russia, and how they were to be treated going forward. Now, that looked like a great opening for democracy and freedom, and it's been pulled back quite a bit. As you know, 3 of the countries did declare independence, and today, thank God, they're still independent, the Baltic states. And 2 their status within CIS is unknown today, Turkmenistan and the Ukraine. But the fact that each of the states had those same worries and were yearning for freedom was certainly reminiscent of the early formation of this country.
Mm-hmm. What do you see ahead for the future of international negotiations over the management of nuclear weapons?
I think that we probably have lost some time that we shouldn't have. I have never believed that these weapons can go away. And so it's a reality that has to be dealt with, and it should be cooperatively controlled. And I think we keep moving towards such things, but as long as we're in nation states, with everybody getting their own choice, it's going to be very hard to get there. I now spent most of my career associated with nuclear weapons and chaired the policy committee for the U.S. Strategic Command for a lot of years. And so I got very close to it that, yeah, you want to make sure that they can do something which seems a miracle that they've always done, and that is to prevent major wars. Because the history up until 1945 was there were always major wars going on in the world that would lead to world wars. And the death toll from those was just phenomenal as compared to all the years in between those. But this is the longest period we've ever gone without such major wars, and I know nuclear weapons are a factor in that. So I'd like to see us all develop a common mind with respect to how we move forward.
Ambassador Robinson, the world is a complex place. Thank you for stopping by for just a few minutes to talk about this issue with us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be back in New Mexico for a while.